Perfect. Let me get this going here. Awesome. So Hadley, tell me and tell everyone who you are, a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. My name is Hadley Hammer. I'm a human, I guess, and a skier. And I was born and raised in Jackson, Wyoming, which was very lucky. And yeah, currently living in the Alps.
Okay, cool. Full-time move to the Alps, or are you splitting time? Like I know for a little while you were splitting time, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to say with COVID because it's so much harder to travel
Right.
around. So I've really, in the last 2.5 years, almost only been in Europe, in Austria.
Okay. What is
Yeah.
that COVID situation like over there right now?
We're about to go into a lockdown on Monday,
No way.
which is such a bummer. I mean, it's a bummer because people, like the hospitals, are really stressed and a lot of people are really sick. And so that's like the actual bummer. And the very side note bummer was one of the parts about living here is the glaciers open in October. And so I've been able to go skiing. And those will
Nice.
obviously close starting Monday. So
Yeah.
that's
So how are you feeling? Like, I mean, you had an injury, you had an ACL again last year, right? Or have you just had
first.
one? Is your first one? Okay. I always assume every skier in the entire world has done more than one ACL.
I hope not.
How do you feel? What was the process like for you?
Yeah. The process was, yeah, it's never great to get injured. You always learn things. There's always silver linings, blah, blah, blah. But ideally, it would have been nice not to spend the summer injured, but instead I did. But it's
Right.
awesome. I have such I've been training at this gym called Base 5, which is like downtown in the city of Innsbruck. And I was training with them before I got injured. And they were like such a godsend because when you live in a foreign country, like knowing which doctor to go to and like physio and blah, blah, blah is such a mystery. And
Yeah.
they, like the second I was hurt, I called them and they arranged everything, like the best doctor who all the like World Cup ski racers go to, and like had surgery fairly quickly. And then they've covered everything from like physio and training. And I've just been in the gym every single day since, I guess the injury was in the end of February, and I've been in the gym since the middle of March, 5 or 6 days a week,
No
like
kidding.
of the day. But that's okay. I'm like never afraid of the grind, I would say.
Yeah. How do
Yeah.
you feel skiing? I mean, you've skied a decent amount, it sounds like so far.
Yeah, I think I've skied 5 or 6 days now, and it feels pretty good. But I can't last all day. Like I get 3 hours in, for instance, now 3 or 4 hours, and then it's like feels just tired. And when it's tired, then you get the like, ooh, this feels a little unstable. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's what's nice is the like beginning runs there's like no fear involved, which I was curious to see how that was going to be. I feel like always post injury you're a little like, ooh,
Yeah.
and it's really cool because you're like, oh, it works. Like all the like, I feel like everything I did this summer was directed towards like, will this help me? Yes, okay, I'll do it. Will it not? No, I won't. And you get like kind of this monk like existence where you're just like training, sleeping, eating. Like
Yeah.
I'm sure everyone's like, a lot of people are like, where have you been? Like, what have you been? And I feel like I've just been like either in the gym or at home doing the exercises or whatever. So
Yeah. Yeah, I
yeah.
feel like it takes a lot of commitment. Like I did mine 3 years ago, and I honestly, like, kinda put it off, like, the PT side of it, and I went and I worked as hard as I could at it, but the focus for it wasn't just there, and I was like, "Oh, it'll be fine, I'll just recover," right? Even though everybody's constantly telling me, like, "You have to keep on it, you have to keep on it," and 3 years later, I still feel weird, like, left like, anything on that knee, I still feel a little awkward, so I guess you hear things from, like, all over the place, I guess, depending on how people treated their PT, and I think that's such a huge part of it.
Yeah, I was like, I don't want to do this again.
Yeah.
And do everything I can. But man, it's like boring and
Yeah.
a little depressing, I think, because you don't get to like I get to express myself in the mountains, and I'm like just such a happier person. And you realize like when you spend every day inside, you're like, oh, this isn't me. And this is maybe why like humans in general are a little bummed out all the time, because like if you spend so much time indoors, it's just not natural. And yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the biggest things I think I've seen, like, since the beginning of the pandemic. It seems like everybody, because people weren't able to get outside for a certain period of time, like when we had those lockdowns, like everybody seems to be valuing their time outdoors much more than they were previously. Like the
Yeah.
rush for people looking to get outside is insane, right? And there's good and bad things, right? People are kind of just going for it, not necessarily getting the education ahead of time. They're just like, I want to go and I don't care what it takes. But I think it's really, that's one of the benefits, right, of this whole thing, was like people are starting to value this, like this outdoor time and outdoor spaces maybe a little bit more than they did beforehand.
Yeah. And you know, I gotta give some people some, I sometimes get annoyed by that. Like I've said it before too. Let me tell you, like, oh, go out with like no education. But I mean, please, I've done so many things without the right experience or the right knowledge. And you
Yeah.
read, I'm really love reading like historical mountaineering books. And all of those, you're like, that was so loose. They kind of have to be a little loose in order to, I mean, man, I should be careful what I say, but you
No, I
know,
get your point though. Like, I don't want to and that's a fine line, right? You don't want to shame anybody because like they want to get out there, right? But
yeah,
and you also don't want to be like, oh, I'm so much holier than you because I got like because I did my Avi 1 or something. You know, that doesn't mean that much. You still have to have like a decent head on your shoulders to kind of figure that stuff out.
yeah,
And you have to like take those precautions. Yeah, it's a very strange area to navigate, I guess.
yeah. And I think what I'd have to look at the data like much more concretely, but I know generally speaking, a lot of the avalanches this year involved people that are fairly knowledgeable and experienced. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think to a certain, I have a maybe just a wildly different opinion, but I think like the degree of control you have in the mountains is way less than we
Right.
assume. And almost if you're a beginner, what's that like arc they always talk about? Like before you, like when you first go out, you're like blissfully naive, just like,
Yeah.
here I go, woo, this is fun, yeah. And then you
Yeah.
take first Abby class and you're like, oh man, everything is gonna kill me. Like I need to just start Nordic skiing again, like no slope. And then you eventually, like once you get like Abby 2 or 3, or you get a ton of experience, you like get into this, oh, I'm like kind of invincible and I know and I can outsmart an avalanche.
Yeah.
Like people, you have an accident or other people have an accident and you like dip back down to that like maybe more healthy, maybe not the level where you think everything will kill you, but like a step
Right.
above that.
Yeah. No, it happens. I mean, all the time. I mean, like, I don't want to use Nick McNutt as an answer as a example, but like last year he got completely buried and like it wasn't really his fault. It just kind of happened. Like he was doing all the right things and everything was set up for success. And you still can get taken out like by a bunch of slough and then you're buried. So and that's part of it. So yeah, I don't know. I hope, but I guess the point, I don't want to lose the point here. Like people should still try to get their educations as much as they can, right? Like we don't want to be like, no, you just go out there and be blissfully ignorant for the rest of your life.
Might be a nice way to live, but no, definitely get your education. If you have your education, like open your arms to people going
Yeah,
outside and like be stoked for them. Because, like you said, like the more people that go outside, like the better it is. Everyone's happier in the end.
yeah. Can
Less
I?
rage all around.
Yeah, for sure. Can I ask you about the difference in the ski culture from being in a place like Jackson Hole, which is amazing and obviously has a very, very rich ski history and ski culture, and now you're in the Alps. Like that's a totally like you're kind of going from like one gold mine of amazing skiing and terrain and knowledge and history to another. Like, so what's different between those things?
Yeah, it's been really interesting to like really observe. And it's cool for me to feel like there's all these things that build into your habits when you're, for instance, skiing in the States or in Jackson. And those all like went, my normal routine went out the window here, which is crazy because I'm doing the same thing, like backcountry skiing, either resort accessed or not. But a small difference, like they don't control their out of bounds within a resort. But that essentially is like everything that's just not pieced, like not groomed. So you could
Right.
go a little bit off the groomer and you're technically like out of bounds. Where in Jackson, for instance, if you're skiing, like there's very few groomers. And
Right.
if you're skiing like classic lines like Corbett's or Tower 3 or whatever, those are controlled by the ski patrol.
Right.
But and whereas in Europe they're not. So very quickly when you get off a chairlift, you could quickly be in like what's considered side country or back country, even though it's not obvious because you don't leave a gate, you don't hike anything, you just
Right.
ski that direction. So
Yeah.
that's one big difference is like I remember someone was like, "Let's go resort riding." And I was like, "Okay, cool." And I show up with like nothing. And he's like, "Where's your like transceiver and your backpack?" And I'm like, "I'm riding chairlifts." Like, and so that's like a big difference, I would say. They do have better access to search and rescue here in
Okay.
the way that it's like more funded, government funded. I'm
Right.
on the board for the search and rescue in Jackson. And so I have a little bit of an inside view on like those differences. And here it's like so much easier to call they use helicopters like
All the
snowmobiles
time.
or yeah, and they'll like land on the slope. You're just like, this seems so dangerous. Like a helicopter, like you when you go skiing in Alaska or Canada or whatever, and you always have the like pre-heli skiing talk where they give the safety of like how to approach a helicopter, and then here you'll just see one like dropping down on the slopes, and you're like, "Oh, yikes!" Like
Yeah.
people are people going to ski into it, but that's a little different. And I think people then, you don't ski with as much gear. Like if I'm going into the Tetons, my bag is full because if something were to happen, I'm assuming like most of the rescue is going to be on me and my friends or my
Right.
partners. Where here, it's just really quick to call the helicopter and it's there. And people
Yeah.
will call it in. Like I was near a slide last year and there was another party, but we were on the ridge. And like the helicopter was there in 10 minutes, and neither me nor
Huh.
the party in the slide, but someone else from another ridge called it in. So it's just like that's a little different, I think.
Yeah,
Than
no, people are like afraid to even take an ambulance ride here, like because you're gonna get whacked if your insurance isn't good enough for an
that.
ambulance ride. And that's
Exactly.
it's a bummer.
It's a huge bummer. I mean, that speaks to just I would say this is like a little bit more pulled back from just skiing world, but it's interesting, especially in Austria, for instance. Like there's just a social system here and
Right.
healthcare is affordable and school is affordable and like all these things are affordable and it's way different than because people are less stressed. Like I've had two big injuries in the States and it takes me years to like pay that off. And I have insurance that's also really expensive. And you're like, this is crazy. Where here it was, I went even to a private hospital, which was awesome. They made homemade cake every day, which was great. And it was
What?
like generally affordable for what that would have cost me, like who knows what in the States. And
Yeah,
here it's just like reasonable.
and something you can just pay for. Yeah, that's one of the things I think that doesn't get talked about very much. And it's funny, I put up a post the other day about lift ticket prices comparing like, Pico and Killington to I forget what I compared, like Chamonix, I think. And the ticket prices are so astronomically different. And then one of the good points that people made was like, this is actually the government actually subsidizes skiing in a lot of these European countries. Like it's part of what they want to do. And it's also part of the culture. So
Yeah.
in the US, it's like it's just whatever they have to do to cover their asses for insurance, for whatever loopholes that they need to cover and be prepared for.
Yeah. It is a crazy I mean, you can tell it's just part of the culture here, and everyone skis at
Yeah.
like such a big thing. It's cheaper here by American standards by a lot. Like my season pass is 600 something euros, and it's to like, I don't even know,
Yeah.
over 50 ski resorts.
Oh
Or
god.
it's
Yeah.
like, it's like I can just ski anywhere in Austria pretty much for 600 euros.
Yeah.
And that's so cheap for me. But here, like, people also don't make as much money, generally speaking. Like, everyone's just living at a
Right.
low. So I don't know what that comes out to, but it is cool because they love it here. And so the infrastructure is awesome. There's like chairlifts
Yeah.
everywhere. It's so nice. It's
That's
bad to
amazing.
like go back to the Tetons and have to do the like Teton slog and just be like,
Yeah.
oh man, I'm out of shape from like just taking a chairlift and like still getting fresh backcountry lines here.
Yeah. That's insane. I'm wondering like how that's going to change over the next few years too, because like it's in one way skiing's gotten more accessible in the US because you have these big passes, right? You can start to go to so many different resorts, but at the same time, your access to those resorts is limited by the pass that you get for one. And then you're also talking about kind of alienating those smaller resorts too. And their options are basically like join a pass or be really expensive to go ski not that great local hill, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's
So
something I really haven't put enough like research into to have an opinion which is better.
yeah,
I just feel like what would be cool is making skiing more affordable.
yeah,
Because
no,
you
for
look,
sure.
especially now as like companies really focus on diversity and expanding who can be in the outdoors, I feel like we have to have that conversation of like the outdoors is expensive, whether you're
Yeah,
skiing or like even climbing. Like they're all expensive sports, and whatever we can do to make them cheaper seems like a great idea to me.
yeah. I had Tom Walsh on a few weeks back, and one of his points was I want skis to be available at Target. You know, like I want them to be available for nothing, so that if people want to go skiing, they have like a functional. It doesn't have to be good. Like it can be a Target product, and people will associate it with Target and understand what they're getting, right? But that way, you can start to see people actually get into it that maybe weren't going to afford it and couldn't understand why they should, budget it into their lifestyles, because that's one of the biggest hurdles too is if you're not good at skiing, you don't even understand why you should spend the money on it, right? Like you don't have that passion for it yet. Why would you go and spend a bunch of money, not just on the equipment, but on the everyday experience of it for something that you don't really know how to do, you don't really get yet? And uh, yeah, I just feel like that's one of the bigger hurdles that skiing's going to have to deal with over the next few years as an industry.
Yeah, for sure. Like the barrier to entry is really high, way higher than I feel like we ever have like honest conversations about.
Yeah, for sure.
And I
Um,
want everyone to do. It's so fun.
it is. It's so. I guess do you worry about it being too busy, right? Like, do you worry about these resorts being too busy and overcrowded? Because that's one of the things that you hear people always. Every time I'm like, I want more people to go skiing, right? Somebody without fail is like the lift lines are bad enough as it is. If we make it any cheaper, you're not going to be able to go skiing at all. And it's like I just don't understand the lot. I don't understand the logic.
I'm never on that. I'm never that one person. I'm like,
Okay.
let's get everyone, whether it's, I'm like, whatever, blow up every secret backcountry spot. The only time I've ever had like big verbal or online arguments with anybody, the two big times have been over like me exposing a secret spot. Cause I'm just like, no way. There's no such thing. No one owns the
Yeah.
mountains. Don't you want other people to experience this? Like that I refuse to live in like a scarcity mindset. I just think it's crazy, and it would drive me insane to be so afraid of like my experience can only be defined if it's like me alone
Yeah.
having this moment. Like, no way, screw that. Like,
Yeah, and these spots are not secret for the most part. It's like people can find them by doing a little bit of research too. Like I'm always a little conflicted in some ways, I guess, because you don't want to see a spot that's not capable of taking a bunch of traffic. I guess this is an issue that we deal with a lot in Vermont because everything's small and like there's not that much terrain, right? And like the good days are so few. So I feel like people from New England in general are very like, we're going to protect our little like spots and areas that we go skiing, and we'll tell you about them after like after we're all said and done. And I actually have a friend that he'll go and ski these lines, and he'll, as he's skinning up, he will go and he'll skin off in different directions and then follow his own tracks back so that people don't know where he's going. And I'm just like, this is so crazy to me that this is how people are doing this.
Well, I think it's really important. So I don't know if you saw this, but there was this, there's this sheep issue in the Tetons that kind of had its moment. I don't know if like the distance from Jackson, like I saw it starting to explode. It kind of exploded on Instagram for a week, and it was really stressful for me. I like lost a lot of sleep, ironically, which you like can't then count to fall asleep. But you know, it's this idea of like the bighorn sheep population, this like native 6,000-year-old gene species, is in the Tetons, and their habitat, they now like winter at 10,000 feet, which would be gnarly. Like spending one night at 10,000 feet is hard enough. I can't imagine like spending the whole winter, but they've been pushed out of the valley, and this is where they've been living. And there's some research, it's not solid, but like what science is completely solid, that people skinning cause the sheep to be even more stressed, and they're already like the most stressed animal population and one of the most native. And so what the park proposed, the park and the Forest Service and the like this group proposed these closures, these winter closures that would close off part of the Tetons to ski touring. And it created like an uproar, which was kind of obvious. And I feel like I didn't give the uproar enough empathy in the beginning, because for me, I was just like, this is a native species. It should be protected. Like my heart like went to the sheep directly.
Right.
But I also forget that like I don't live in Jackson full time anymore. The Tetons aren't my only access to skiing. And for some people, it's the reason why they like suffer through the existence of Jackson, which can be a struggle. Like it's so expensive. It's high stress. There's tons of people there. And the Tetons are like their escape and why they go there. Yeah. And I didn't give that enough empathy. I still agree that we should protect the sheep. But one of the questions I had was like, what, and this goes back to what we were speaking of, is like, what is enough? Like,
right.
And it's, I think, kind of important for us to ask as resources get less and less. And you think like, what's enough good ski days for me? And can then the leftover be for someone else to like ski my secret spot or like my really good spot? You know, like I think as skiers, we're like free loving and tend to be like a little, I don't want to say like to the left because it's not a political thing, but I think we are in general like a very welcoming community and a great community. Right. But we also can be pretty selfish at the end of the day. I can, for sure. And I think we have to think about that sometimes when we're thinking about access and who else we should get to ski. And yeah, lift lines suck, and a few powder tracks in your like line kind of suck, but also that's not the entire experience, at least not for me.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to kind of explain because skiing is such an individual pursuit in a lot of ways, right? And in so many ways, you're like, this is a feeling of euphoria that's just for you, right? And the people that are immediately around you. So sometimes I think people get defensive of their areas and their spaces because they associate like the good things, right, with skiing. And somebody going to those spots may change the way that they feel about that. And I think it's a hard line, and it's natural, I think, for people to get a little defensive about it, but there's a line between getting defensive and actually preventing someone else from having that same experience that you have, right?
Yeah, definitely. And it's I think just an interesting line to walk. I tend to like just fall off the line totally, and I'm like, whatever, powder for everyone. I don't know, but I also can admit that like I have so much access to so much skiing, and so
Right. And skiing's your job, right? Like it's what you do. Like it sometimes that conversation's hard because you talk about families that have only 2 days to go skiing, right? And they want to spend both of their off days like with their families, like stick the kids in the car, go skiing somewhere. And that's where like the limitations of it, I think, become like where I guess understand it a little more, right? Like I have the opportunity to ski a shit ton and it's amazing and I'm really lucky. But some people just don't have that. So I guess they protect those individual days so much sometimes. So I don't know, but nobody's taking
and
those days away. That's the
sure.
other thing is like nobody actually is taking those days away. It's just that like that's the perception. So I don't know. It's very bizarre.
Yeah.
Very bizarre. Can, can I ask you about working with brands now that you've moved? Has your relationship with, especially like I don't know, I think Align, and I know they have international athletes as well, but does your relationship with a brand change at all when you change your home base and change your location, especially moving out of the country? I don't know in terms of sponsor obligations what that means, I guess, as an athlete.
Yeah,
Right.
that's a great question. I don't know if I have a really great answer because like I moved because of a like personal reason, so people were giving me a little bit of slack, I think anyways, and then
Right.
COVID hit and didn't everyone was isolated in a way. And if
Right.
anything, I could actually produce a little bit more because here like we still had access to skiing. And in general, like I feel it's a positive for me to be here because as you said, like Europe has such a rich ski culture, but it is a little different. And I think it's awesome to give that feedback to brands on both sides and to expand. Like Line has a pretty good base in Innsbruck and it's growing and it's cool to be here and like push that. And
Yeah.
for instance, Del Bello, I work with a little bit and I get to go next week to the factory and work on boots directly. And so in that way, it's awesome because I can be right here
Yeah.
with the manufacturers. But I think in general, like as an athlete in snow sports, my career is focused on like expeditions and trips somewhere. So you're
Mm.
always going somewhere and where you are at home matters, but it doesn't matter as much as I think.
Yeah.
I, I mean, I have all my contracts still. So.
So they must still like you. Yeah. Yeah, it's I just wonder because I know people get so attached to their home areas, especially as athletes or as creators. You're like, am I still important if I go somewhere else, right? Am I still important? I think that's the thing internally that people struggle with is do I still have value to brand X, brand Y? And for you, I think it's a little different, right? You went to Austria, and I think it's I don't know. I hear people like out loud worrying about this for themselves pretty often, where they're like, if I move west, especially here, right? If I move west, am I still valuable?
Yeah,
Like, do I still matter if I go to a bigger pond? You know, I guess, and that's one of the things to think about in a lot of ways.
yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, brand relationships are really interesting, and it's such a game, which is wild because there's not that many jobs that have so much insecurity built into them. Like, for instance, if you have a contract and it has your obligations, say social media obligations, 2 work days, which are going to a store event or a photo shoot, and you fulfill those obligations after a year, you could still get fired, which is wild to think about. Like you've done your job, like what's listed on paper, you fulfill, and
Yeah,
you're a good person, you've done like pretty well, and it's it's kind of a bummer that it's so insecure, I would say,
yeah,
because I think it causes a lot of people a lot of stress. I mean, I've definitely dealt with the stress. I feel like at this point, I'm now confident enough in myself and my skiing and my value But that certainly wasn't the case in the beginning. And I had a lot of like tearful nights of like, especially as a girl, like, what do I need to do? I need to look different or be different to be a skier, or I'm kind of quiet and I like to read and I'm kind of a nerd and like I don't like to go to the bars and like I love to dance. Like if there's a dance party, I'll be there. Going to a crowded bar is my idea of like hell, I guess.
Yeah.
And so it took me a long while to feel like I had value, even though I didn't fit the stereotype. And I
Right.
can understand how a lot of athletes, especially in the beginning, are so scared if they, as you said, moved or like changed or exposed a different part of the personality that wasn't part of like the box that the industry had put them in, how scary that can be, which
Right.
is a bummer.
Yeah. I actually wanted to ask you about boots as well. You brought up the Bello and kind of working with them. Like that's one of the, we have a couple girls that host a show on this network on Mondays called Big Stick Energy. And they're the shit. But one of the things that they've been talking about a lot since the beginning is the lack of availability for performance women's ski boot and why that doesn't exist. Right. It's like, and even like on the ski wall behind me, like there's a bunch of boots that are 130 flex for men that do not need 130 flex boots. And then on the alternative side, there's not a single, other than a race boot, not a single boot at 120 or 130 flex that's available for women on the wall, with the exception of like Atomic makes one, but there's definitely severe limitations on that. So why do you think that is? Is that aggravating to you? I've seen a bunch of photos of you skiing a Blue Lang race boot. So like, I assume that like you've kind of dealt with it by skiing in that, but talk to me a little bit about that, I guess.
Yeah, it sucks. And it sucks since the beginning of I have been like able to live off of skiing, I think now for 8 years, let's say, or 10, and I still don't have a boot. And that's crazy to me.
What do you mean
and
you still don't have you don't have a boot that you enjoy?
We're really, really close, I think, right now with Del Bello. Like, I'm really excited to go down to the factory. I don't even know if I'm allowed to talk about it, but like, I'm really excited. But I mean, I liked the Langs for a long time. I skied in this it's a junior 120 flex race boot, and they had stopped making them, but they were super nice and like kept a little stash for me and would send me these boots. But and then I had the cast guys modify them. So I'm touring, like, skiing the blind in modified race boots, like plug junior race boots. Like, that's gnarly. I'm surprised my hip flexors haven't blown out. And like I will give Del Bello credit. They do make a 21 in the Lupo.
Yeah.
I think, but yeah, I had access to a stiffer tongue, which helped, but it's still like, I looked it up, touring boots specifically. I do think there's plenty of like good alpine boots for girls with small feet. I have a 21, by the way. So it's like,
okay,
real challenge. I looked it up the other day, and from my brief 1 hour of research, there's 89 options for a 120 to 130 flex men's ski touring boot. 89. And what I could see is that the 4 options for girls that go down to a 22. And the, flex, I think, as you've talked about, is really not accurate. And nor is like the actual sizing, because one of my roommates, my old roommate, she was in the Technica 0G size 22, and she has 2 size bigger feet than I do. And like, so there's no way it's a real 22. It's got to be more like a 23.
Yeah, a lot of them say it now on those boots. They say like 22 to 23 and a half is the shell size. And like and they just put a different liner in there. And it seems ridiculous to me.
And where I think actually like where performance women's ski touring boot dies is in the hands. And I am sorry if I offend anyone, of a sales rep. Because
totally, 100%.
Distributors or like companies, because I went on a rampage one time emailing all these boot companies. They're all like, look, we would, and sometimes we even have, and you put it on like the sales sheet, and no one buys it because, from what I understand, and anyone can email me and tell me I'm wrong. Happy to be educated on this, but as a sales rep, like you would be taking a risk because they don't have the data of how many of those boots they would sell. And so it's a risk to put those in the stores. But I could give you my Instagram password and you can look at all the messages I get from girls.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I know I struggle with a boot. Michelle Parker struggles with a boot. Like,
Tons of people do. I put up a post and like it was literally like 200 comments were like, you know what we want? We want boots that ski well and that are like performance oriented. Like that's what we care about.
totally. And then like I get so angry because I'm like, if you want girls to ski well, give us a boot. Like,
Give us
any
the same
guy,
gear.
like, go ski in boots that are 2 sizes too big and tell me how well you ski. Like, there's a reason maybe why the girls' level, a lot of reasons, isn't as high. But for one, it would be that they're like swimming in their ski boots.
Yeah, totally. There's a total discrepancy in the gear that's available.
Over flexing. So yeah, the boot thing. Hot topic.
It's funny. I talked to a brand, one of the boot designers at a brand that I work closely with, and he asked me to kind of leave his name out of it. So I'll leave his name out of it. But he was like, look, like I've been pushing for this for a very long time. And this is like their lead boot engineer. It's like, I've been pushing for this for a super long time. The problem is we put it on the sheets and exactly like you said, shops either don't buy it or it doesn't get sold. And I think the reason that shops don't buy it is because most shops are run by like old white guys. Like, and that's not a bad, like, it's not an awful thing, right? Like, I'm not like taking shots at anybody. I'm telling you the reality. Like, that's the situation that we're in ski shops. So they're not aware that people on the internet want stiffer boots, right? They're just aware of the boot that they have on their wall that sells and sells out, right? And I think it's part of that problem is companies don't offer any incentives. That boot won't even make it to production a lot of times because I think he gave me the numbers and I don't want to misquote what it was, but it was like he put them out there for the whole North American district, like 130 flex women's boot, and he got 3 orders for it. It was like something like it was less than 5. It was like such a ridiculously low number for the whole US that I was just like, it has to just not be shown to people, right? Because I would buy 5 and I wasn't even aware that it existed. So that's I don't know. It's a bummer, and I hope that it starts to change, and I hope that more boots are available in the same way that like Develop makes that Lupo down to a 21.5. Like I think that's really great, but there should still be specific product for women if they want it, right? Like that should be available.
It should. And like, I studied hospitality in college, and they always taught us how to make like a menu. And there was always the different components of the restaurant menu where you have like the item that's super cheap, the Wiener Schnitzel. It costs you no money. You can sell a ton of it, and that's like your cash cow. But then you have the like fancy steak that you're actually going to lose money probably on or barely make any money on. And you kind of need both. And it's like this company might lose money. But if we are like driving home this, like, if everyone's all like inclusive and diversity, like you gotta make gear to represent the marketing campaigns that you're putting out there, is my ask to these companies and to the sales reps. Like, think about why do we need any more technology that's not serving like these needs? Like, in my head, the greatest skis already exist, the greatest outerwear already exists, the greatest boots already exist, but where there's a discrepancy is that they don't exist for everyone. And I feel like that should be the focus in the years to come.
Yeah, and I think you'll start to see some changes in the future, but I just don't think it's happening rapidly enough in the way that it needs to. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Everybody's modifying their boots. Like I watched Alex Armstrong like build a boot last year, like out of like other pieces of plastic that she like stuck to the front of her boot so that it'd be like a proper touring. Like it's crazy. Like
My favorite was I tried skiing for a while with like, you know, those cool like sweatbands for tennis, like the wristbands.
yeah.
I would like put those around my ankle and like
Yeah.
ski with that in my boot to like take up some volume. It's just crazy. Where like
Yeah.
there's 89 other options if you have like a standard size men's boot. That's nuts. There doesn't need to be that many.
Oh, for sure. There doesn't need to be that many. Like, if you want to take something off the top, you can take some of those performance men's boots off. Like, because it's not like shops make a ton of money on those either, right? Like, they sell them to a certain crew. Most of them are like PSIA Pro, like whatever, at a discounted rate. So you're not making a ton of margin anyway. And then you discount them at the end of the year, and then people buy them on closeout because that's what's left more often than not. So couldn't we just eliminate some of those that are available and offer some more? Because like I don't know, it's
so you're saying, Adam.
yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, a couple more things and then I'll let you go. I want to talk to you about discourse, what that is, because I don't really even understand what discourse is. But you've been actively on it. There's links to it on your website. It's something people can subscribe to, it seems like. And I'm super interested and I want to hear a little more.
Yeah, thanks. I need to go back and like redo that website and make it really clear because that's been the feedback. But I think it's hard to define in some ways because it's a new style of, let's call it social media, maybe. But essentially, I think I communicate best in like long format writing, and long format still maybe is only like 5 paragraphs, but certainly more than the Instagram word count limit
Right.
on a caption. And I think it came at the beginning of like the pandemic and a lot of other things in my life. And I was like, I'm fine with the deal that half of my job is communicating and building community and sharing stories with people. Fine by me. But I really didn't like the available platforms. Like I find Instagram to be bad for me. Like I don't feel good on it. I get really bad like comparison issues, or I just waste a ton of time. And I was like, I want to do something where I'm really proud of what I'm sharing. And I also like and create this place where people feel like they also have a place to share things that doesn't feel so intense. Like on Instagram, it's so weird. Like the only options are to like something and to comment. And comment, that word alone is like so silly to me. It's not like question. Like what if Instagram made that a question? Like instead of it saying comment, it's a question. Like I
Yeah.
feel like we'd have way better discourse with people. And so that's what the discourse is. It's like a virtual campfire, I call it, where it's a platform. It's behind a paywall, mostly because it just costs quite a bit of money to operate this thing with all those weird technologies that I needed to pay someone to tell me how they worked, and like LinkedIn. But essentially, once a week, I send a long format piece of writing, and that goes to everybody. And then I also once a month do a writing prompt, because a lot of people write to me and say like, oh, you're such a good writer. How do I do that? I don't even know how. And so these writing prompts help people like write and express themselves. And then they can send them to me and I put them up on the website. And there's no comments, there's no like buttons, there's nothing. And so it's just this place where people can express themselves either under their names or anonymously about whatever they want. And it can be anything. Like the first writing prompt, for instance, was like, tell me about your school lunch. And it's so cool because people write and you get to know so much about a person without it being so divisive. And it's not their opinion. It's like, I know so much about you based on like what you ate as a kid for lunch. I ate a cup of noodles. And that says a lot about my family and like our lives. And it's not an opinion or anything. It's so cool to get, you know, like people would tell stories of their school lunch, and it's just the coolest flashbacks because you're like, oh my God, I remember those like Rice Krispie treats, like whatever it is. Or, oh, you're the kind of kid that got a note in their like beautifully packed lunch from their mom, which was not me. My mom's amazing, but that wasn't her thing. And so it's been awesome. And I feel like there's a little over like 120 people on there, and it's people have this space where they can, it can be funny stuff like that, or like someone wrote in about how hard it is to have a child. Like they've been trying to get pregnant for 3 years, and it's like a really emotional piece. And both pieces have room there, which is awesome. And yeah, it's just like sitting around a campfire and listening to people's stories, but online. And I love it. And it's also really cool because once a week I have to think of something interesting, which is actually kind of hard. But it puts me in a cool mindset because, yeah, I think more, try to observe more in the week to like have something to create good content instead of just like, I don't know, whatever content.
Yeah.
It's been awesome. I love it. I hope at some point I can phase out every other media I have and just be there because it like raises the bar in my own life. I have to write better, I have to communicate better, but also I get to know people better in a way nicer way. And so, yeah, that's Discourse, a virtual campfire, I guess.
Yeah. I think it's really important too, because it also allows you to kind of showcase your writing a little more for people that are interested, right? Like magazines and, website blogs and that kind of stuff are not the way they used to be, I feel like. And this is kind of a thing that allows you and others to kind of go out there and put their writing out there, and people that value it are there to see that kind of thing. And I think that's one of the most important things in anything is finding your target audience, right? And if you're getting these people that want to be involved with this thing, then that means they also really give a shit about your writing and your thoughts and your opinions and their own.
Yeah. And I would say it's been awesome. It's like a place for humans to be humans. Like there's a bunch of skiers in there, and like some of the content is very mountain focused, but there's one woman that lives in Germany who's 65 and she's didn't even know how she stumbled across it, but she did and she loves it. And you're just like, this is awesome. Like there's so much room for any type of person, especially because the topics, I try to make them very like universal experiences. So
Yeah. Last thing I wanted to ask you about is you used to host a podcast called Nausicaa Cast, and that was I thought it was one of the best podcasts that was out at the time, and then it just stopped. So tell me about why it stopped. That was actually seriously, it was one of the shows that I listened to when I was like, 5 years ago or whatever, when I was like, I need ideas of what we can kind of do. That was one of the shows that I was like, this is well done. Like the interviews, the thoughtful content, like it was really good. And I've listened to that Racy Stiegler episode like 10 times, I feel like. And it's just really interesting. So I wanted to know why you stopped doing that, because I think you're really good at it. You're a good talker, you're a good storyteller. So I don't know. I'm just wondering.
Yeah. I thanks for saying I'm a good speaker. For me, I express myself so much easier writing, and speaking stresses me. I mean, you're really nice to talk to, so it's easy. But I guess my strength has always been in my writing, and I felt at a certain extent like it was so I mean, I can see how much work you put into these ones. It was really hard, I think, at the time for me to balance everything that I was doing. And so someone actually the other week asked me if I would start a podcast again. And maybe now where there's like more resources, but I feel like it was taking up so much of my time that I didn't actually have. And I have a hard time doing things like halfway.
Yeah.
But
No. Yeah, I get that.
It was like cool to talk to some really interesting people, and maybe it'll come back.
Yeah, that's one of the things. That's actually one of the reasons that like we started hosting other shows on this feed, was because like so many people are really good talkers and good interviewers and they have voices, in this industry, but the legwork of hosting a podcast is really annoying. So like that's actually what we ended up doing for the other shows, is like you just send us the raw audio and like
Oh wow.
we'll put it on the feed. And that's like that's kind of what the whole idea was, so that people that want to do this kind of thing can, without having to worry about like the promotion of it is exhausting, the putting the stuff out there is exhausting, getting it up on the feed, making sure the audio doesn't completely suck is really hard. It's
Yeah, and,
crazy.
like, even just how many different websites you needed to, like, link
Yeah.
to get this, like, Blueberry and all these. I was like,
Yeah.
how do I even put this thing on the internet? Took, like, hours and hours of my life.
Yeah.
But
Um,
thanks.
of course. Where can people find you on social, on discourse, your website, the whole deal? Where can people find you?
Yeah, hadleyhammer.com is where you can find me. Like, I also put up pretty extensive gear reviews there and what I'm using in, like, my kit, and you can also email me directly from my website, which is yeah, I love talking to people, so people feel free to email me there, and the discourse is also there, hadleyhammer.com/discourse. I'm also on Instagram, hopefully for not too much longer, but that's hadhammer. My Twitter got hacked a long time ago, and I'm sure it still exists. Didn't open it ever again. And
Awesome.
yeah,
Well, thank you for the time, Hadley. I appreciate it.
thank you. Yeah. Oh
Um,
man, East Coast. I went to school in New Hampshire, so I have a
did
lot of
you?
yeah.